But my name is Michiel Martens. I don't know if it's next to this. No. Okay, then. There it is. Well, that's my logo. I also have a design studio like the others. Yeah, that's me and that's Jets. We have combined our studios lately. So first we were two businesses and now we are becoming one business. So, and here's a little show of slideshow of our studio, where we do a lot of experiments, and we like to play a lot with material and also the story behind materials as well. Like, how do you end up with what you've got, and how did we end up with what we've got now? So this is material research for the material of bones. Like, if you look at the old days, bones were like the plastic of today. Like everything was made of bones, like needles, buttons, tools, weapons. So if you're an archaeologist, you find pottery, scarves, yeah, and of course a lot of pieces of bone and also used bone. But this material is not used at all anymore. Actually, in the Netherlands, the material is waste. Like, you have cows, you grow them for food and milk, you slaughter them, you eat them in a hamburger or in a nice dish, and what do you do with all the bones? So some part of the bones, they are made industrially by, well, in an industrial complex to make glue and other kind of food-related ingredients. The other big part of the bones is gone, they burn it, so it's a waste. But the material itself is really beautiful. You can use it as jewelry, you can use it as decoration parts, you can bend it, you can color it, you can dye it. So this was a really open view on the material itself. How can you work with this? How can you manipulate it? And how can you give it maybe a new future? And if you're talking about bones, I also talk about skeletons in a way. Like this cabinet we made, we call it the skin cabinet. And we call it skin cabinet because the structure itself is really rigid and metal and square and hard, and the surface around it is really soft, fragile, and we make it shrink around the base structure. So the outer shell shapes itself around the inner part. And you end up with really nice curves. It's a showcase cabinet, so you can show your beautiful stuff in there, which you want to have like in a special place. And the material, it's really interesting, like the outer shell is made of plastic foil, which shrinks, and it takes like the minimum surface with the boundary of that, which is bound by the structure itself. So you get like double curves, which are really hard to make analog in another way. Another project also, which is fascinating, is the complete, well, it's a technique used in Japan. It's called sumonagashi, I think. I always pronounce it wrong. But it's, you have water and you have oil-based pigments. And if you combine the two, you have a film on the water with pigment and with a pattern. And the pattern you can manipulate, yeah, you can play with it. So the amount of oil in the color or in the dye afflicts the end result. And what we do with this, I hope this works. No, it does not. Then I do it like this. We already had trouble today as well. And note that sorry for the image, but the camera is not moving. So the pattern you see is just only physics. It's just a reaction between water and a hydrophobic oil-based pigment. And the surface film you can capture with silk, paper, but also with what we did with. Now I have to go back. Where is it? I am absolutely not a Windows person anymore. Okay, maybe this wasn't that good. Oh, we've got the alert again. Is there somebody who knows how to deal with this stuff? Otherwise it gets a bit... Okay, another project is about the perspective on material. Like you have companies selling material and they have the idea you're going to use it in a certain way because everybody uses it in that way. And this material, yeah, we're skipping it through now, I see. But it's a sheet material which you have to apply on wood. And you can make tables out of it. It's just like the finishing layer of this. So it's sort of a plastic. You have it in all kinds of colors, you have it in all kinds of materials. And I used one which has a really thin layer of metal inside. But the whole thing is 1 millimeter thick. And what's interested me was, now a bit further. Yeah, next one. Yeah, this one. How can you take this material, which you have to apply it to something else, but then tweak it a bit, that it's independent on its own, so that you don't need a wooden surface. So how can you change the normal way of thinking into a new way of thinking? Like a piece of paper, it's really floppy. You can't put it up; it just falls, and it. But it doesn't if you make one fold in it. You can make it really rigid and strong. So we did make a foldable cabinet out of this by just making some incisions, folding the material, and it became really rigid and strong and lightweight and scalable in multiple ways. Steam print is another project of us. Like the industry uses nowadays textile printing machines, and you have to first you have to make the fabric which you want to print. You have to open all the fibers, then you print the ink on it, and then you have to close the fibers by fixating it, and they do it with steam. But the nice thing about steam is that you can also use it to influence the print. Like if you have a printer and you have a picture, you print your picture and it's exactly how it is on your screen. It's nice, of course, but in some ways it's also nice to have some sort of analog touch. And we were looking for a way to influence the digital like sturdiness in itself, like it's really it is as it is, and it's not like a handcraft looking way of coloring or dyeing fabric. So we used steam to influence the process and to fixate it in the same time. And it ended up like you use less ink and you color more fabric in the end. So it's quite interesting outcome. I hope this works. It doesn't. I skipped the movies. Another part which is really totally different again. It's about burning wood. I don't know if you have wood stoves in Amman or in Jordan. Probably not that many. But in Holland it's sometimes really cold. And yeah, but wood stoves are always quite boring. They're square, they're made of glass, and they call it design. And we wanted to play with the fact, how do you light your fire? And of course it's a song. But how do you play with the fire? Do you use chopped pieces of wood, or can you make it more stronger visual? So what we do is we use one big trunk of a tree, which is dried, and we burn it up piece by piece. So the wood stove eats the log, the tree trunk, as you heat your space, or outside or inside. And therefore, to create, because a square door doesn't fit around a round tree, so we needed to end up with a result where you can have several sizes of trees into the same machine, in this case the stove. So we had to make an aperture. And it's like in your camera, it can open totally and it can also close totally by just turning it around. So that was a nice engineering part. And we managed, so we are now busy with the company trying to produce those. Another way of working, what we do is giving ourselves boundaries. This is a quest of movability, light, and material. Like, how can you change your surroundings by adding movement and play with the light? So we ended, well, we did of course a lot of research, and we ended up with a blue window blind. Well, normally window blinds are used to shield off the outside from the inside, and we wanted to bring it more into your living room. The blue color is like the same spectrum as the blue sky, so I don't know, I always get really awake when there's a blue sky above me. So this color keeps you fresh, keeps you also up and running, and you can play with the intensity by switching the blades by angle. So you can intensify the color, you can change the hue, and it's a really interesting thing to play with. We also made one with mirror. And the funny thing is that if you close it, you can still look through. And of course, you don't maybe want that in your bathroom window, but it is a really absurd way of experiencing something like this. Yeah, you can skip this. You can skip this as well. Yeah, I wanted to show you some movies, but they don't really work that well. Yeah. Well, it says it's working, but it's not working. Well, this is the extra version of the window blinds. Only we gave ourselves a limitation extra. We didn't want to have only a linear movement, but we also wanted to have more movement, a radial movement, and maybe both. So we had this crazy material. It's called electroluminescent. It's not it's a light source, but then it's a light source over the whole surface. So it's not a spotlight, like a lamp, which is one spot of light emitting light, but this is like a whole surface having a chemical reaction, and by that it emits light. But it's not that good for the environment, we found out, and it's really expensive. So, well, the environmental part we found out later. But we thought, like, yeah, we should first make tests. And we found out that if you spin it, like a centimeter becomes visually like 4 centimeters. depending on the speed you spin it. So that already saved me like, well, 16 extra pieces of light-emitting foil. But before buying a lot of these expensive materials, I wanted to test what is the best shape? How can you get the right proportions and the best effect? So we started making ugly scale models with cheap foil. And the good part about this is you make a model really fast. You don't think too much. You just do, you act. And in the end, maybe the next one, in the end, this became way more interesting than the first idea. So instead of buying an expensive material, claying or molding your design around it and hoping to find the best solution, the solution came from another angle, and it came from making ugly models and my drill. So we decided to skip the light-emitting foil and go on with this, because this had way more potential. Okay, next. We tried it also in reflecting materials, so you can use it at night. Like you shine with the light on it, and the thing reflects totally, and you get an absurd image. It's a really pity the movie doesn't work. But so we start looking for better materials, and we came to this material which has multiple colors in itself, depending on the angle you look at. And therefore, the plastic cheap model changed into a really fluid, fluid form. And next, but you need to see this one. Okay, one moment. It's in here. Second one. This is already tweaking or like playing with the settings. Like how can you change and influence the form by the movement? We ended up having some sort of a magical soap bubble. Sorry, it's now this way, but it should be this way. But this is also interesting. Sorry for the noise in the background. I didn't know it was there. But it's really fun to see that some strips of material and movement, well, of course it's really logical, but you don't think ahead like this. If you go to the motion pictures, you go to the cinema, it's exactly the same. You have 24 pictures, and your brain can't control all those images, so it becomes a fluid movement. This is exactly the same. You have all kind of strips of material. They move, but your eyes, they can't cope, and it becomes one fluid shape. It becomes one bubble. People say it's like soap bubbles. We showed this in many places, in Milan by Dutch Virtuals, in a big gallery in the Netherlands. We made a huge installation, and also for Amsterdam. And it's still going on, and now we're busy with Cambridge University in England to try to get scientific research done on the effects of this thing in your surroundings, because it does have some sort of an influence. It really makes you relax.
Yeah, well, we show our holons,
and that's me.
It's a moving installation. Yeah, we call it holons, but it's sort of a bubble. They look like soap bubbles. But they're mechanical, so they don't pop.
Yeah, and at first we started with using light-emitting foil, and then we just started playing, turning it around, and then when we were filming it, we saw that there was a three-dimensional shape instead of the loose, flat strips. really think it's a soap bubble, so they want to try to
Touch it.
And
To break it.
yeah.
Or to blow it away.
Well, this was a big success. There were like, I don't know how many thousand visitors coming. People were going crazy. Kids were lying underneath them, and also adults. People were running around it. It was like somebody opened a candy box in kindergarten. Yeah, well, that was about it. We're showing the Holons in 2 weeks' time in Beijing as well. So if any of you is present at the place there, feel free and welcome to come. I invite you all. Thank you very much. And I hope, yeah, it was a bit messy, but I hope the story became clear. Okay, thank you.